How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from WeatherSponge5000, and in this video we're going to focus, of course, on this next major Midwest and Northeast blizzard, which could bring over a foot of snow in many areas of the Midwest, as well as some portions of the Northeast. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more what they call it. So let's begin by taking a look at the computer models, and at this time, of course, we have this Clipper system now coming off the Pacific Northwest, and we're seeing a lot of cold air behind it. This will create an unstable environment right around the midsection of the country, which will allow for a high amount of convection to occur and a large precipitation area to develop in the United States, and that will lead to our next major blizzard for the Midwest and the Northeast, where we could see wind gusts occasionally over hurricane force in some areas, and of course snowfall rates equivalent to 1 to 2 inches per hour. We see that this low pressure system is expected to move southeastward as a result of this ridge that's just to the north of it, and we're going to see this interact with this very warm Gulf of Mexico air, and this pressure gradient between this ridge that's centered over eastern Canada and this low will create a strong southerly flow to be able to force a lot of that warm and moist air to interact with this very cool Arctic air that's just to the west of this low pressure system, and that will create a highly unstable environment, and that will lower the pressure drastically, which will enhance the wind speed as well as the snowfall rates as it continues to head further eastward, where we do see the millibar pressure drop down to 969 millibars, and we see very strong winds throughout the Midwest and the Northeast. Now it's pretty much guaranteed at this point we're going to see a major blizzard impact the Midwest, and it seems like both of the computer models are in pretty good agreement regarding the exact trajectory, the strength of this low pressure system, and the area where it wants to bring the heaviest snowfall. We see that if I were to show you guys the European model, we do see that the European model is also very confident with what the GFS model is stating, where they're both in really good agreement, nearly in an identical trajectory, and we see nearly an identical intensifying process, and we see the millibar pressure for both depictions drop down to the 960s as this approaches eastern Canada, and we see very strong winds associated with both storms as well. And if we were to compare the snowfall accumulation forecast between two, also very similar, but there is a very key difference between the two, and that's the European model does not want to bring as significant of a snowfall accumulation there. Of course, it's still very significant. We see a large portion of Michigan experience 6 to 12 inches of snow, but we see that in the areas further westward, the snowfall isn't necessarily as high as what the GFS model is forecasting, where places like Chicago and Milwaukee, they're experiencing 3 to 6 inches, but not necessarily the 6 to 12 inches the GFS model is forecasting at this time, let alone the forecast before that, where the computer models were almost leaning towards bringing over a foot of snow right around Chicago area. It seems like the European model has deviated from bringing as heavy snowfall for the westward, but this would still be a very significant winter storm for a lot of the Midwest, and especially for Michigan. And we do, and another key point is that the European model does not want to bring the snow as far southward as the GFS model, as the European model does not expect there to be enough moisture overlapping the cool air mass in the southeast for much of any snow to accumulate, unlike the GFS model, where the GFS model is still confident that some portions of the southeast will experience some snowfall, but we do see a little bit more snowfall right around Tennessee and the extreme northern portion of Arkansas as well as Kentucky, while the European model wants to restrict the heavier snowfall further northward. And if we were to take a look at the GFS model, we also see that the snow is a little bit heavier, but in regards to where the heaviest snow is, they're pretty much both in agreement that the heaviest snow will be right around Michigan, of course, where the lake effect snow will be the strongest, where the strong winds will blow over the warmer than average Lake Michigan, which will allow for quite a potent lake effect snow event to occur right around the western portion of Michigan, and we see that snow extend to the northeast as well. And another key difference as well I want to point out is that the GFS model still wants to bring the snow a little bit further eastward, to where potentially the snow could move as far east as the border of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So maybe if the GFS model scenario was correct, we could maybe see some snow in Washington DC and Philadelphia. It of course won't be very heavy. We see that the GFS model is forecasting no more than an inch of snow in those cities, but it still could bring the possibility of a white Christmas if the GFS model's scenario was correct, while the European model does not want to do anything close to that, where we see the European model does not want to bring the snow further eastward. Now, since the European model over the past several runs has been the more correct model, I lean more towards the European model forecast, thanks to the fact that it's so far has been having a better handle when it comes to forecasting this storm. However, we can't rule out the GFS either, since it's still a reliable model. So if you're hoping for maybe a white Christmas, or at least a little bit of snowfall just before the Christmas time in cities like Philadelphia and Washington DC, you might this might be your best shot of having it if the GFS model were correct. And we even do see a little bit of a tracing that the European model expects when it comes to snowfall just to the west of Philadelphia and Washington DC. So there's still a possibility. I will still say that the possibility it actually accumulates in those cities is still small, but there's still that possibility in Washington DC and Philadelphia. So it might be a cause to get a little bit excited, but don't expect much if there is any snow in those cities. But we do see that the heaviest snow should be in Michigan, where you should expect 6 to 12 inches of snow, and of course heavier snowfall as well should be right along the Great Lakes of the interior northeast, such as upstate New York. So you want to keep a close eye on this, especially if you're in Buffalo and in the northwestern portion of upstate New York as well. As certainty is high, you will experience a major snowstorm in these places. The only areas where there's still uncertainty is, I'd say, the southeast, where the European model does not want to bring the snow further southward, and of course the areas that are near the New Jersey Pennsylvania border, there still might be that possibility you could see maybe a little bit of accumulating snowfall if the GFS model was correct. But I lean more to the European model's case in this scenario, since it's been the more correct model. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But make sure to prepare for blizzard conditions all throughout the northern Midwest and the interior Northeast. Now, taking a look at the Futurecast radar to see when the Midwest could expect snow to approach their area. So you see that the snow will eventually move into the northern Midwest by the early Wednesday timeframe, before eventually moving southward. And of course, that very cool air mass behind this trough will create a very unstable environment for a heavy amount of snow to develop right around Iowa, Missouri, and it should approach the Chicago area right around the afternoon timeframe of Thursday, and this should approach Des Moines in the very early morning hours of Thursday as well. And then we should see the heavy snow eventually approach Indiana and Ohio and Michigan, I'd say by around the late Thursday to early Friday timeframe, as that's when you should expect the worst of the conditions in those areas. And St. Louis also could get involved with heavy snowfall. Now, take a look at the wind forecast to really forecast when you should experience the worst when it comes to wind. So the wind, the strongest wind should be centered right around the midsection of the country by the early Thursday timeframe, and eventually we see that wind field quickly expand as this cold front eventually interacts with this very warm, lightly dense air to create a high level of wind. And we see winds enhance right around the northeast as well, where we see another low pressure system attempting to develop right around the Carolinas at the same time. And we see that the winds definitely increase quite a bit, and the winds right along Lake Michigan should be quite strong. So if you live along coast, you need to watch out for the possibility of power outages, especially as well in the Atlantic coast, where you could see wind gusts up to 60-70 miles per hour in some areas, as that's suddenly not out of the realm of possibility. So make sure to pay very close attention to that, as this should be a powerful wind threat as well, thanks to how strong the storm will get. Now, taking a look at the rainfall forecast, that's another concern for the northeast. We do see that the coastal regions of the northeast should expect right around 2 to 3 inches of rain, as the rain should be quite heavy at at times thanks to the thunderstorm activity this instability is gonna create. So you need to pay close attention to the possibility of flash flooding in areas right along the Interstate 95 corridor, because that's certainly a possibility. Even if you don't necessarily experience a heavy snow threat, you're still bound to potentially experience a potentially major flood threat depending on where you live. So if you live near a flood zone, you need to pay close attention to that possibility. Now, taking a look at my snowfall forecast when it comes to this extreme Christmas blizzard Elliott, so not much differences in the forecast from what I made yesterday. I'm still expecting a fairly large area of 6 to 12 inches. This includes Chicago, a large area of Iowa, Minnesota, and Missouri, and this includes the northern portion of Indiana and Ohio as well. As I believe that the snowfall will be a little bit higher than what the computer models are stating, because the computer models are using the ratio assuming that 1 inch of rain equates to 10 inches of snow, and that ratio isn't necessarily won't necessarily be very accurate for this snowstorm, because the temperatures behind this winter storm are going to be very cold. So 1 inch of precipitable rainfall will produce many more inches of snow. So I do expect the snowfall totals to be a little bit higher in this scenario, and blizzard conditions are likely, as blizzard warnings are issued in portions of Minnesota, and I only expect that to expand. And we do see 1 to 3 inches further southward, as there's still that possibility you could experience a white Christmas, and maybe Philadelphia and Washington DC could get in on a few snow flurries. I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath for it, but still something to be aware of. And the interior Northeast, of course, should expect heavy snowfall, so make sure to prepare for this potential for a significant blizzard throughout the Midwest, because it's pretty much guaranteed at this point it's going to happen. We're going to see very strong winds and heavy snow associated with this storm. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. I hope you guys have a great day.